Over the years, I've heard plenty of praise for the original For the King from the many D&D loving friends and communities that I am associated with. Some even invited me to play it, others just told me how much fun it was and how much they thought that I would enjoy it if I ever did give it a shot. See, I don't usually gravitate towards D&D side of video games because I've never been fortunate enough to have a group to play with, whether that be in person or even in the same time zone. That makes investing 30 hours into a solo strategy game feel like too much of a commitment when I know I will not enjoy it as much as I would laughing alongside others. So I never felt the drive to sit down with For the King, and even now I still haven't. Which means that I can't make any direct comparisons to that game while reviewing For the King 2. What I can say is that For the King 2 had a very rough start, like far too many games these days. At launch, it wasn't well received. The changes felt like they strayed too far from the original's concepts. On top of that, it was unoptimized, shorter, less explorative, and flat out unbalanced to the point where meta builds dominated and everything else struggled. Since then, Iron Oak Game Studio has been working non-stop to fix both major issues and smaller annoyances. If we were to compare this to release, it has gotten a lot better, and the improvements are enough to give it an honest second attempt to see what it really offers for a turn-based enjoyer. It's been almost 2 years since I last checked in on the game, but I do remember the UI being one of the biggest issues. It pushed players away, made combat feel clunkier than it needed to be, and then turned the overworld traversal into more of a chore than an adventure. Add in the connectivity problems for multiplayer, and playing with friends often became more of a hassle than an escape, as it made your life a living hell. Eventually, we just all put the game down because it just wouldn't work. This being said, over the last 2 years, the devs have clearly been listening. They've addressed feedback, improved systems, refined the interface, and rebalanced mechanics while also adding in new DLC and characters. It's always nice to see a team that isn't fighting its community but actively working with them. Even if not every suggestion is implemented into the game, the biggest offenders have already been fixed or adjusted, making the overall experience far smoother than it used to be. If you enjoy turn-based RPGs with a touch of narrative, For the King 2 does offer some background lore to dig into. Here you play as a ragtag band of heroes in the world of Faerûl, joining the resistance against Queen Rosamund, who is now a tyrant consumed by the dark powers of chaos after the defeat of Vexor following the events from the first game. The story is split across multiple branching adventures, but I can't say that it really resonated with me. For most players, the lore is going to take a backseat to the theory crafting for the strongest builds. Because the game is segmented into multiple campaigns, it ends up feeling like it's too much of a grind. Because here you are forced to abandon your built-up party and start fresh each and every time. Instead of carrying your progress forward against scaling challenges, the game always resets you, which makes hours of investment feel wasted. Like, you have the ability to traverse the sea and plentiful dungeons, so why feel this restrictive when the game can slowly scale up harder and harder throughout each campaign? I expected the progression to build up naturally, but after 5 to 6 hours of surviving these dungeons, quests, and overworld exploration, being told to throw away my characters just to continue the story felt like terrible design. It only gets worse when you pick new heroes because the game defaults to the same professions you had already chosen in your last run, which only adds more salt to the wound. If there were at least some narrative justification like chaos warping time and resetting reality, it could make sense. Instead, it ultimately feels arbitrary. When you're capped at level 9 for Chapter 1 with no explanation, as Chapters 2 and onward are capped at level 14. While I understand this creates a balance to prevent over-leveling alongside the in-game timer for objectives and missions, I cannot say that I liked it. This design of a heavy time investment mixed with punishing elements dragged out the gameplay. The inability to save, combined with the runs ending prematurely due to the enemy scaling, makes the experience demoralizing unless you stick to a meta build. If you do try to play your own way, chances are you will fail unless you get lucky with the rares and epic drops right at the start of the game, which can happen quite often. To make it work, I often had to funnel all of my EXP into a single character, leaving the rest weaker just to stand a chance while carrying the rest of the team, that or playing solo. It's because the EXP system itself feels unbalanced, because everybody here shares one pool, but splitting the party into solo levels them faster, even though it is riskier. On top of this, the RNG shrines and certain characters like the Herbalist can skyrocket your progression with early power spikes, throwing the balance out the window. Character progression is another problem, because across my 15 hours of gameplay, unlocking new classes didn't feel rewarding. I wanted more freedom to customize from the very beginning. In most turn-based games or even D&D, I lean towards rogues and rangers, and while the hunter and the stable hand are available by default, I still feel like the starting stats were too restrictive when you cannot alter them to your own roles. And as a result, I had to give up on the idea of playing a proper glass cannon rogue. because the game technically has stealth, poison, daggers, lockpicking, and status effects, but they are all scattered across multiple classes and items instead of being a singular cohesive playstyle. And this progression is also gated behind multiple attempts. Each run earns you lore points, which you can unlock perks, starter benefits, and gear in the in-game shop. While this provides some long-term rewards for most players, it also reinforces the grind-heavy loop. Beyond the mechanics, I did run into some smaller annoyances, like in combat the music does sometimes cut out and is replaced by ambient sounds that fit the current theme. A bug that's still lingering after all of this time. And the pacing is still painfully slow. Normally, slow turn-based pacing works if I'm attached to the characters or the story or even the world. Unfortunately, here it doesn't work for me. Battles felt like roadblocks that I could not savor. A speed-up toggle like with other turn-based RPGs offer would have gone a long way. Instead, I found myself tempted to use Cheat Engine just to fast forward, which surprisingly made the game suddenly easier to put up with. And even though there is a built-in speed-up option, you have to click repeatedly to enable it, which is not a toggle. It's for every single character and enemy while they are performing their actions. Mentioning once again on launch, one of the clearest issues was the visual UI because it didn't provide enough information and, much like the combat, required far too many clicks to get the simple results. After several quality of life updates, this has improved a lot. Still, I find it odd that progression is still tied to this lore store. It works for players who enjoy grinding through multiple campaigns, but it's disheartening to know that specific builds or playstyles remain locked away until you've sunk countless hours into unlocking them. While that's not strictly necessary, they gate off options in a way that feels too restrictive and punishing to the player. It's an auto-leveling system, so you cannot allocate your own builds, which to me is a letdown. I guess it comes down to why it feels punishing. The game is designed to keep you in the starter area for as long as you need to so you can fight and level up slowly from level 0 before moving on to the level 1 and 2 encounters. As somebody who overly enjoys branching out to the highest possible locations before I am ever capable of dealing with the scaling factors, this design hurts my way of playing through and enjoying most games. But to me, this causes friction with the intended game's difficulty because if you end up over-leveling before you reach the next location, the game becomes such a breeze to play through. But if you don't, it's much too difficult. It never feels like it's balanced. It's either one or the other. When the OST works properly and isn't bugging out, it's genuinely catchy. I caught myself humming along to the main combat theme more times than I realized, which is a good sign considering how often you'll be hearing it. I also did have some mixed feelings about the models and enemy designs. Some looked odd and took some time to grow on me, but over time the world itself won me over. This is because Faerû is a vibrant and diverse world with distinctive biomes like swamps, seas, and forest. Each area brings out its own modifiers, its creatures and debuffs that keep you on edge, while also adding in their special events, elite encounters, fortresses, and even boss fights that all add layers of challenge while drawing you into the setting. The most standout feature though is how every piece of equipment that you acquire changes the look of your heroes. It's becoming more common in games, but it's still something that I appreciate because it adds a lot more personality instead of wearing a default set. Outfits not only make your character stronger, but it also makes them more stylish or completely clownish. And with friends, these moments can add humor or charm to the grind as you become increasingly more bizarre. For the King 2 is a party-based RPG, so the basics are self-explanatory. No matter what mode you choose, be that the campaigns or Dark Carnival or otherwise, the core gameplay is going to be the same. Long, drawn-out, slow-paced, turn-based strategy where you control your 4 heroes against ever-increasing chaos modifiers and debuffs, be that alone or online with strangers and friends. With the recent Tinkerers of Fate DLC, it added 2 new characters, each with unique traits. The Toy Maker can capture and summon enemies with their dolls, while the Fortune Tellers use tarot cards to pull blessings, items, and curses, adding even more RNG into the mix. The roster diversity is important, but it ultimately comes down to personal preference. My experience has been rather mixed. Some classes stood out as nearly essential, while also others felt situational at best. The Herbalist, for example, is irreplaceable thanks to the powerful support and damage skills like Party Heal and Find Herbs. The latter can grant strong EXP boosts to the Scholar Warts, which makes each run easier if paired with the right pipe upgrades. And for your secondary and third character, the Scholar and the Blacksmith were also reliable choices offering defensive options, magic, and also debuffs. The fourth slot, however, often came down to whatever I felt like experimenting with. The game does allow for more extreme playstyles, as you can crank up the difficulty or even attempt campaigns with fewer than 4 characters, Personally, I don't see the appeal limiting yourself to what feels like artificial punishment, but it is an option for those who thrive on self-imposed challenges. More importantly, if you want to tackle the Dark Carnival, which has its own leaderboard, that can place your name among many of the great players in other players' games immortalized in stone. Each day in-game, you're on a quest to complete your tasks that are on a timer, and failing them results in a royal decree or destroyed objectives. This means that you rarely have the luxury of playing at your own pace. Even on the lowest possible difficulty settings of Custom, For the King 2 doesn't feel designed with casual players in mind. Once you understand the build diversity, the proper predefined way of playing, and stat allocation, subsequent runs do become ridiculously easier, but the challenge still remains. Sometimes that's naturally, and other times it's artificial, since each campaign forces you right back to level 1 to do it all over again, and once again, because there are no save files or features like that, once you fail or succeed, it's back to square one. After pushing myself through as much as I could, I had to put For the King 2 down. Playing solo was utterly draining, and I wasn't having much fun anymore. With friends, the experience is much better, and I can attest to that. That's clearly what the game was designed around, but alone, the flow, immersion, and gameplay elements all fall apart. Be that the overscaling of enemies, constantly debating whether to split or stick together, getting ambushed, scrambling for gold and EXP, or hoping for a lucky rare drop that trivializes fights until your weapon breaks or the next zone ramps up in difficulty. It all felt more frustrating than fun. I would love to return to the game someday because it does some things well and it certainly delivers a challenge, but I also understand why many of my friends, even those who love the original, have not bothered with the sequel. If you're new to the series, I would honestly recommend playing the first game instead. Even though I have never played it myself, the amount of praise that I've heard over the years should be reason enough to say that it is at least worth checking out. For me, the biggest striking point is still the lack of a speed-up feature. Even if the original game handled it the same way, this trudge through the early game grind of each campaign is something I cannot see myself doing ever again. And if I do, it will be with the use of a speed hack so that I as an individual gamer can enjoy it at my own pace.